Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to What is Dieselpunk? Dieselpunk 101, and this is a little bit different panel, and I think you'll like what we do. We're going to start off this morning with a smooth groove. Can you dig that? I knew that you could. Hey! Come on in, grab a seat. Here we go. Folks, here's the story about Minnie the Moocher. She was a low-down hoochie coocher. She was the roughest, toughest frail, but Minnie had a heart as big as a whale. Hidey, 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 hidey. Hody, 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 oh. Heedy, heedy, heedy. Hidey, 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 oh. Now that ain't bad, but it ain't great because not everybody's singing. I can tell because your lips ain't moving. So we're going to do this one more time. I'm going to sing it. You follow along with me. And if we all stay together, it'll be a lot more fun. Here we go. Hidey, 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 hidey. Hidey, 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 hidey. Oh. Oh. Heedy, heedy, heedy. Hidey, 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 oh. She had a dream about the king of swing. He gave her everything she ever needed. Built her a house out of gold and steel, a diamond car with platinum wheels. Hidey, 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 hidey. Hidey, 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 oh. Schooly boot, schooly boot, schooly bully, bully boot. Yeah, try that one. He gave her his townhouse and his racing horses. Each meal she ate was a dozen courses. She had $1 million worth of nickels and dimes. She'd sit around and count them 1,000,000 times. Hidey, 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 hidey. Take it home. Hidey, 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 oh. Heedy, heedy, heedy. Hidey, 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 oh. Oh. Yeah, that is the real thing, baby. Can you dig that? I knew that you could. I am John Pyka, the artist also known as the King of Swing, the Tower of Power, the Dieselpunk prophet of pop culture, John Pyka. And, my name is John Pyka. The character is Big Daddy Cool. And we are here today to talk about what is Dieselpunk, and thank you guys for being here. I know that it's always a lot of fun being getting up early and doing the first panel of the day. And so you get your maximum audience at the first panel of the day. Said with no degree of facetiousness at all. So I'm going to sit here. Can you guys see me if I sit behind this? Sure. All right. First of all, let me introduce myself. I told you my name is John Pyka. I am a 30-year professional entertainer. I've been performing as the character of Big Daddy Cool for next year will be 20 years. And I've been all over the world. I've headlined Las Vegas. I've produced my own show off Broadway as this character. And the character became, the show became a book called Tales from the Flip Side. And then Tales from the Flip Side became another show, also called Tales from the Flip Side, which became a podcast, Tales from the Flip Side, which became a video series on YouTube, Tales from the Flip Side. So, read the book, see the show, listen to the podcast, watch the videos. I'm a genius. Anyway, along the way, I discovered something that was really unique. I've been doing, 40s and 30s and 40s style my entire life. And we were at a rehearsal, actually auditions, for some Bombshell Kittens. And by the way, behind the camera, Facebook Live, is Tina Vita, Bombshell Kitten extraordinaire. Wave your hand in front of the camera, Tina. Yeah. And we were at auditions, and, a friend of mine who goes to Dragon Con a lot says to me, she says, what do you think about steampunk? Because we've been doing the retro future thing, for years. And I've been doing retro since, high school. And she says, what do you think about steampunk? And I'm like, I like the idea of steampunk, but the Victorian era just isn't really my thing. And so we're talking, and I'm like, I wonder what they have, if they have anything for people like us that are into Noir and Pulp and Deco. And so I started doing searches around, and I searched Noir punk. I didn't really find a whole lot, but it led me to another term called Deco punk. Okay, and Deco punk led me to a site called dieselpunks.org. And that, for me, was like a religious experience. I discovered an entire world, an entire community, and an entire genre built around the era that I love. And they call it Dieselpunk. And since I discovered that, I've gone on to launch a podcast, the Dieselpunk Podcast, which is now not just a single podcast, it's actually a network of several podcasts. We've been doing that for 6 years this May, and average about 15,000 listeners per month. So it's growing, and it's heard on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all around the world. Our biggest audiences are in the US and Russia, Japan, and Germany. And we're going to talk about why in a minute. And so I have become, through that process, recognized as the voice of Dieselpunk, and now some people recognize me as one of the, not just one of the creators of the genre, but as one of the founding fathers of the genre, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So what is Dieselpunk? Glad you ask. You ask good questions. Oh, and, I recognize that guy. Dieselpunk, a lot of people say, and this was an early meme that I found in my search, that Dieselpunk is kind of like steampunk, but with internal combustion. And early on in the original days of Dieselpunk, this was true. Steampunk is based off the idea that technology stopped with steam-powered technology. And the original idea behind Dieselpunk was that Dieselpunk, the genre, stopped with the development of the diesel engine, which was in use during the 20s, 30s, and 40s, primarily as the engine of the economy and the engine of society. Over the years, though, as the genre has kind of evolved, we take a different stance on that. And basically, it's more of a style and aesthetic. So where steampunk stops with the development of the steam engine technologically, Dieselpunk style is what stops. Technology keeps progressing, but the style and aesthetics stay in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. So Dieselpunk is a style that fuses the art, style, and culture of the 20s through the 50s, through 1957, with contemporary sci-fi and fantasy to create a new genre. It's Retro-Futurism. And Retro-Futurism, does anyone know what that is? Oh, lucky for you, I've got a definition right up there. Retro-Futurism sees the future of tomorrow through yesterday's eyes. I coined that phrase. That definition is mine, to be used with permission. It is trademarked by BDC Entertainment. That's a joke. Not really. Don't use it without my permission, Facebook. All right. So the era that we look to for inspiration was defined by movement and revolution. Jazz, modern art, world wars, two of them. World War I and World War II. Streamlined technology, and an evolution from stilted Victorian hypocrisy. My steampunk fans love it when I say that last line. And we'll talk about what that means in our genre in a minute. So what makes something dieselpunk? It's contemporary in origin, which means, and dieselpunk's watching this right now online, I am about to redefine contemporary. In the past, contemporary for our genre has meant made since the end of the historic era that dieselpunk is set in. So we would say made either since 1945 was the original timeline. We've expanded it to 1957, and most people would say contemporary is anything made after 1957. That's not really the definition of contemporary, though. When we talk about literature and art, contemporary really means during the common era, right? So in our case, we've got people alive today who were alive during the diesel era in the 1920s. There are still people alive. Which is really remarkable when you think about it, when you think about the historic era. So, contemporary really means anything that is contemporary to the common era. So for dieselpunk, it is going to be 1914 through today is going to be contemporary. Anything made before 1914 is going to be considered futuristic science fiction. And that's a change in the definition. And there will be people watching right now who are part of the dieselpunk community that are going to take me to task for that. But I think it's an important distinction because there are a lot of things that we're going to talk about that are influences of diesel and dieselpunk that were made in that common era. It's got the aesthetics of the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, what we call decadence. It's got science fiction, whoops, what just happened there? It's got science fiction, alternate technology, alternate history, magic tech, occult tech, or magic and occult elements. It's something that turns history on its side, that makes it not historical reenactment. We are not historical reenactors. And it's got punk, which is countercultural or a push against the status quo, a celebration of the anti-hero. And that punk element takes a lot of different forms. Now, a lot of people hear that word punk and they automatically go to the snot-nosed kid that is a troublemaker, right? That's kind of the contemporary definition of punk. Well, when you get into the etymology of the word punk, it's a German word, which really means pushing against the common culture. And dieselpunk does that. And for me, it's in the form of a celebration of the style of the era in my everyday life. I'm what I call a lifestyler. I push against the contemporary casual culture of America. I reject the national uniform of the t-shirt, cargo shorts, and flip-flops. And I dress in a shirt and tie, either waistcoat or jacket or both. I wear a fedora or a flat cap every day. I don't own a pair of jeans. The shorts that I do wear when I go to the beach or to ride my bicycle or to exercise are not cargo shorts. I despise cargo shorts. They're flat, fitted shorts. Anyway, that's enough about that. We'll talk more about it in a minute. Acknowledgements of the dark elements of history is another element of Dieselpunk. Whereas steampunks have a tendency to gloss over or forget some of the darker things about their historic era, Dieselpunks don't. We don't celebrate Nazis, but we acknowledge that they existed and they were bad guys. We don't pretend like that never happened. We acknowledge the warfare. We acknowledge the civil rights struggle of the era. Early on in the Dieselpunk genre, there was a heavy emphasis on diesel-operated machinery. And because of the aesthetics overall, there tends to still be that, but that's not what defines the genre. The aesthetics is what defines the genre. And like I said before, the style and aesthetics stop moving past the historic diesel era. All right. This is where we're going to have a lot of fun. Any steampunks in here? Yeah? You're going to hate me for this. All right. So, is it steam or is it diesel? Now, I'm going to preface this by saying, I don't participate actively in the steampunk community. Like I said at the beginning, I think it's really cool. And I love the idea. But I've always been a dieselpunk at heart. I've been dressing this way and doing this style since I was a kid. Since high school. It wasn't until 6 years ago that I discovered it was an actual thing. But I had been doing it for 40 years. 30 years. So, everything I know about steampunk is as an observer. So that is the disclaimer here. So, steampunk is largely set in the Victorian era, but it's actually a 100-year period before 1912. It's largely a literary medium, emphasis on steam-powered technology, and it's marked by authors that steampunks tend to look to are Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, Mary Shelley, Bram Stoker, Edgar Allan Poe. And in the diesel community, we see the end of the steampunk era with the sinking of the Titanic. Dieselpunk is the 1920s through the 50s. I need to correct that. It's through the 1957. And really, it's 1914 through 1957. It's largely a visual medium. There is an emphasis on diesel fuel, but the visual aesthetics are Art Deco, Pulp, Noir. Music influences are really heavy. Jazz and swing and bebop, rock and roll are all part of the diesel era and all really define the aesthetic. A lot of military influences. You can't avoid that because it's bookended by world wars. And the diesel authors who were writing during the era are Edgar Rice Burroughs, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ray Bradbury, and sorry steampunks, H.P. Lovecraft. All right, and this is the timeline the dieselpunks look to historically for reference. 1912, Titanic sinks and it ends the steam era. 1914, two big major events happen. The Panama Canal opens, and we consider this the official start of the diesel era. 1914, ooh, that's an error. That 1917 is when the U.S. enters World War I. World War I starts in 1914. 1945, the atomic bomb ends World War II and starts the atomic portion of the diesel era. And for those of you watching online, you guys know I've spoken and written about this a lot. I believe that there's no such genre as atomic punk. Atomic punk is really diesel punk. All atomic punk is diesel punk, but not all diesel punk is atomic punk. I've got a finer note on that. Then 1957 is Sputnik, the launch of Sputnik, and is the official end of the diesel era and the start of the space age or the information age. And some people call it the cyber age. For a long time in the diesel punk community, 1945 started the atomic age, and 1957 continued it through the 60s to the current era. And I maintain that even though we saw a huge shift in technology with the atomic bomb in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, we didn't actually see the cultural change until the launch of Sputnik. And the reason for that is, and that's where you see the fashion changes, the music changes, the real definable cultural changes happen in 1957. And I was going to say something else about it, and it left me. But that's where the atomic bomb was terrestrial. You know, even though it was a huge technological advance, it was part of our sphere. Once we launched Sputnik, we were outside of our Terran plane. And that's why there was such a huge cultural shift. Because now we were no longer confined to our blue ball in the heavens. We could go beyond the stars. All right, so a couple of ways to express dieselpunk. Obviously, literature. There are writers of dieselpunk. There's dieselpunk artists. There are musicians who specialize in neo-vintage, fusion. We call it electro swing, the fusion of neo-vintage and contemporary music. Gaming. There are dieselpunk gamers who exclusively play games with the aesthetic. Cosplay. A lot of people just want to do the cosplay. And they emphasize a lot the heroes of the era, especially comic book heroes, or the military aspects of dieselpunk. That's what you see mostly in the cosplay. And then lifestylers. That's what I am. Daily expression. I wear diesel style or diesel inspired style every day. I focus on vintage and neo-vintage style. I have a love affair with Art Deco style, and those are the ways it can be expressed. So we're going to talk about those aesthetics. This is a frame from a movie. Anyone recognize this movie?
Robin Hood and the Seven Hoods.
Robin.
You know what? That's a great movie and a great example of dieselpunk. But no, this is from The Great Gatsby with Leonardo DiCaprio. So some other aspects, you see a blending of Art Deco and military. A lot of times in dieselpunk, you've got that mashup. And the next slide is a perfect example of that, where you've got the Art Deco style car with the military machine gun mounted on top. And that makes it dieselpunk in and of itself. It's part of the punk, part of the sci-fi aspect. But now make that machine gun a Tesla ray gun, a Tesla death ray modified machine gun. Ooh, it don't get any more punk than that. All right, so let's talk about movies. This is where I said dieselpunk is largely a visual medium. And dieselpunk is overarching, almost predominant visual aesthetic in Hollywood. As cool as steampunk is, we don't see that aesthetic very much in films. We see Victorian style, but we don't see the mashup of the technology with Victorian. There are a couple of movies I can think of off the top of my head. Wild Wild West.
Golden Compass.
Golden Compass, yeah. But there's not a lot of them, right? It's a short list. Whereas for Dieselpunk movies, The Shape of Water, 13 Academy Award nominations this year. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And there's a sequel coming out later this year. Wonder Woman, the new movie. And actually, for that matter, the first season of the television series. Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark is actually considered to be the first true Dieselpunk property. Now, the term didn't exist then, but we recognize it retroactively as the official first expression in film and literature and pop culture. Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow is the quintessential Dieselpunk movie. If someone says, what is Dieselpunk? I can hand them a copy of Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow and say, this. It has everything in it. It has Art Deco, Gangsters, it has Nazi scientists, it has giant robots, it has ray guns, it has modified military equipment. It's got a moral tale about the value of life, and it's everything that Dieselpunk is. Dick Tracy with Warren Beatty, which is, by the way, one movie that was made specifically to be seen on Blu-ray. If you've never seen it on Blu-ray, you've never seen it. The Rocketeer. By the way, there's a sequel to The Rocketeer coming out next year called The Rocketeers. And there's a new Rocketeer who is a woman based on the famous pilot Bessie Smith. She's an African-American pilot who is taking over the role of the Rocketeer. It's very cool. The Shadow, King Kong, Peter Jackson's King Kong in particular. Now, the original King Kong would fit the definition. Contemporary in origin, it's got the aesthetics because it was made during the era, and it's got science fiction. I mean, what's more science fiction than giant gorillas and dinosaurs still existing, right? Captain America: The First Avenger is Dieselpunk to the nines. It's the second movie I would hand you. If you said, what is Dieselpunk? I'd hand you Sky Captain of the World of Tomorrow, and then I'd hand you Captain America: First Avenger and say, watch these. Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, is largely considered by the community to be a Dieselpunk classic. And my thoughts about this have changed over the years. Originally, I agreed. But the more Dieselpunk has evolved as a genre, the less Blade Runner fits in the genre. And especially now with Blade Runner 2049, it's even less. Which, by the way, if you've not seen Blade Runner 2049 on the big screen, I'm sorry. It's a movie you have to see in a theater with a digital sound system. I already mentioned Wonder Woman. Inglourious Bastards. Anyone know why that might be Dieselpunk?
We're fighting Nazis.
But more than that, what element does it have that would make it not just historical?
We're killing Hitler.
What's that?
We're killing Hitler.
We do kill Hitler in that movie, which makes it alt history, right? Yeah. Sucker Punch. Love Sucker Punch. Batman '89, the original Tim Burton movie, and the sequel, Batman, was it Batman? Not Batman Forever. What was the second one? Batman Returns? Was it Batman Returns? Yeah. The Tim Burton Batmans are Dieselpunk. And then Iron Sky. If you've not seen Iron Sky, go do it now. The premise is end of World War II, the Nazis escape to the moon. And they build a colony on the moon. And in 2018, which is ironic because this movie was made 5 years ago. 2018 was, kind of in the future. But in 2018, they come back from the moon to invade the Earth and to try and reconquer it. It's awesome. They don't win, by the way.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. Because that wouldn't be awesome. But the movie itself is awesome. All right, Dieselpunk TV, Tales of the Gold Monkey. Does anyone remember this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. This is considered by most to be the first entry for a lot of people into the genre of Dieselpunk if they didn't see Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That TV show was actually made to capitalize on the popularity of Indiana Jones. So it had a common texture, but very different style. Agent Carter was Dieselpunk to the nines, full of Retro-Futurism, and it had everything: the Art Deco, the Gangsters, the secret military, science fiction, advanced technology, everything. Batman the Animated Series is Art Deco through and through. Man in the High Castle. Babylon Berlin, which is a brand new one on Netflix. It's a German show that is subtitled, but beautiful. Watch it. One I left off of here, Legend of Korra, is considered to be Dieselpunk. All right, music. We talked about music. Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, End Time Spasm Band, Caravan Palace, Postmodern Jukebox. Who doesn't love Postmodern Jukebox, right? So we're looking at neo swing, electro swing, the fusion and the combinations of genres. One of the biggest expressions of Dieselpunk right now is in comics. I'm a comic book freakosaurus. I love comics. And so a couple that we see, The Goon, Athena Voltaire, which by the way has a brand new series that just launched this week on comic book shelves. Athena Voltaire, by the way, she's an aviatrix, but the daughter of a famous archaeologist who was trained by Harry Houdini. But she's a pilot, an adventurer. Awesome story. Awesome concept. Lobster Johnson. And he's up in the right, in the top part. Kind of a noir mashup of Batman and the Green Hornet. Tommy Gun Dolls. Hellboy 1952 to 1955. That's a new series. Betty Page is a brand new comic series. They're on issue 6. And it reimagines Betty Page as a secret agent, a spy in the mid-50s. And there's actually historical precedents that suggest that could be a real possibility. Maybe not for Betty Page, but recently it was revealed in the last 10 years that Harry Houdini was a spy for the Secret Service and British MI6. So we're starting to find out that more celebrities who had special access to global powers were actually secret agents using their celebrity as a cover. And that's the comic series Betty Page supposes that. The Green Hornet, the Rocketeer, Atomic Robo, Moonshine is a great one. Werewolves, werewolf moonshiners in Appalachia, at war with the Chicago mobs who are trying to come and take over their operation. Awesome. Maybe the best series of last year. Angel City, 19XX, Trigger Man, I can go on and on and on and on. It's a huge aesthetic for comics. There's a huge body of Dieselpunk. Oh, I forgot my favorite, Half Past Danger. Basically, imagine Indiana Jones, Steve Rogers, Captain America, the Black Widow, and a defecting ninja as a team fighting the Nazis who are trying to weaponize resurrected dinosaurs. It's so good. It's so good. Half Past Danger. All right, some games. BioShock, Children of the Sun, Crimson Skies, Cuphead, Wolfenstein. And the game that I mentioned, Children of the Sun, is actually the first time we have recorded in pop culture that the term Dieselpunk was used. Larry Pollack, the creator of Children of the Sun, when asked to describe his role-playing game, he said, it's like steampunk, but with internal combustion. I guess you would call it Dieselpunk. And what's interesting about that is he's credited as using the term, but he actually stole it from another game designer named Anders Blix. Anders Blix is a Finnish game designer who used the term first, but it wasn't published in the US until Pollock used it to describe Children of the Sun. Oddly enough, Pollock is considered one of the founding fathers of the genre, but since he coined the phrase Dieselpunk, he's not been heard from since. He is not part of the community. However, Anders Blix is an active member of the community online and at events. Some books. Hard Magic by Larry Correia. Ghosts of Manhattan. Leviathan by Scott Westerfield. That whole series. Amber Lowe. Empire State by Chris Alexander. And Tales from the Flip Side by John Pyka. That guy looks awfully familiar on that cover. Yeah. That's my book, Tales from the Flip Side. Those of you who came in late, I have a show that became a book that became a show, and a podcast, and a video cast, and read the book, see the show, listen to the podcast, watch the videos. Kidneys. All right. Some art. Diesel City by Stefan. And Dieselpunk, the retro futures of the all-American Art Deco years. Those are books of art, and you'll see art pieces like this. If you've researched this at all, you've seen some of the art that's out there. One of the elements that came out of the Diesel era is burlesque and pinup. Now, burlesque had existed prior to the Diesel era, but as mainstream commercial entertainment, it really didn't come into fashion until 1934. Chicago World's Fair, Sally Rand performs her world-famous fan dance in the World's Fair Pavilion, which is the main stage, basically. Sally Rand's fan dance was done completely nude, only covered by the feather fans. And she's performing that for mainstream audiences, men, women, children alike. And it was a huge sensation. Huge. Before then, that kind of burlesque was relegated to the western frontier saloons and the red light districts of urban centers. Now it's come mainstream commercial, and Sally Rand becomes a household name. Interesting, too, that in 1934, burlesque became mainstream entertainment. Today, it's now relegated to the red light district of urban centers. What has happened to us since 1934? We've gotten a little bit prudish, I think. We've taken a step back, I think, culturally. Josephine Baker came out of the Diesel era. If you know anything about Josephine Baker, before Madonna, before Britney Spears, before Marilyn Monroe, there was Josephine Baker. She danced topless, wearing only a skirt with bananas tied to them. Basically danced nude. She was the first African-American singer-dancer to be a member of the Ziegfeld Follies, and she went on to create what would become the USO as part of the French resistance during World War II. And then I mentioned Betty Page. Betty Page, of course, becomes an inspiration for a generation, becomes the template for contemporary pinup and cheesecake ever since. So we'll talk about cosplay a little bit. Here you see some of the military elements that I mentioned. This is Stephanie Casto, by the way, from San Diego Comic-Con, doing a gender-bend Captain America. This top right, your left, I guess.
The couple?
The couple. That's actually World War II era Wonder Woman and Steve Rogers, Captain America from the First Avenger. Next to that is Georgina Elizabeth, who owns Atomic Girl Pinup, and she does every week, releases online through her Patreon, Diesel era Deco inspired Dieselpunk pinup. And then the bottom one is cosplayer Galactic Cat doing her DC Bombshells Hawk Girl. DC Bombshells, by the way, another comic property that is Dieselpunk. All right, based on what I've shared with you, there are a couple of burning questions in the Dieselpunk community. When you search the Dieselpunk title, you'll find in your Google searches Mad Max. But based on what I've said that Dieselpunk is, contemporary in origin, has the aesthetics of the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, has science fiction and fantasy and counterculturalism, does Mad Max meet the criteria to be called Dieselpunk? What do you think?
It's not the right era. No. I'd say no, because it's more of a 70s punk aesthetic.
That's right. That's right. It has 3 of the 4 elements, but it's missing the biggest element, the most important element, and that is the style aesthetics. It is what I would call post-apocalyptic punk, or post-apocalyptic sci-fi. The second question, knowing what we've just talked about, do you think Star Wars is Dieselpunk? Is it contemporary in origin? Does it have the style and aesthetics of the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s? Is it science fiction or fantasy? And does it have a countercultural element to it? A celebration of the anti-hero? What do you guys think?
I think yes.
Who said that? I think you're right. Is it something that I would hand someone and say, this is Dieselpunk as the first example? No. But the longer you're in the genre, the more you recognize the elements from Star Wars that Lucas took directly from the source material of the era. The Saturday morning serials, you know, the inspiration from World War II in terms of the mechanical, the ships and the weapons and the imagery. This picture is from from Force Awakens, and it mirrors frame by frame a very historic, some very historic footage of Adolf Hitler addressing the Luftwaffe. So yes, I consider it good Dieselpunk. And I'm allowed to say that because I have a podcast. I have the podcast. So if you want more information, here are some resources. Dieselpunks.org. It is the central hub of all things Dieselpunk. The Dieselpunk Podcast, which is my podcast network. And we have a Facebook discussion group just called Dieselpunks, plural. There are a lot of different groups. There's no one super group. There are a lot of different ones. Now, This is not part of the presentation, but let me just add one thing, and this is for the folks watching on Facebook as well. I did not mention two people who are considered founding fathers of the Dieselpunk genre. Nick Audens and a guy named Mr. Pycraft. Some of you guys know Nick Audens. He's the publisher of the now defunct Gatehouse Gazette, the Steampunk Journal. Does anyone know who I'm talking about? Yeah. Nick Audens wrote one of the first comprehensive articles on Dieselpunk 10 years ago. Hasn't said another word about Dieselpunk since. Has not been part of the community. Mr. Pycraft wrote an article. This is Dieselpunk. Has 10 years ago. Has not been heard from since. And we kind of have this attitude in the Dieselpunk community right now. What have you done for me lately? And while we honor their thoughts and philosophies, they're not part of the community. So now we look to the people who are actively creating the genre, and we can talk more about them offhand. I'm not going to get into it, but they basically created two of the different flavors that we look to: Deco punk and Gothic. Deco Dieselpunk and Gothic Dieselpunk, and there's a third in there, which is Atomic Dieselpunk. So that's it. How are we on time? What are we at? Oh, we got about 10 minutes. So what's in here after this? Do we know?
I think it's belly dancing classes.
Okay.
Belly dancing classes.
At 11?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to wrap up, but I want to go ahead and let you guys ask a couple of questions. Any questions? Comments? Yes?
So for TV, Murdoch Mysteries, do you consider that to be steam or diesel?
You know what? I am not familiar enough with Murdoch Mysteries to say. I would consider Perot, the television series Perot, to fit the Dieselpunk genre. Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. I should put that in the presentation. If you've not seen Miss Fisher's, you got to see it. It's awesome. But Murdoch Mysteries, I've not seen it to be able to say.
Well, that's light and electricity, so I would say it's more than that because it's right around through this injury.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I'm not that familiar with it. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, I'm going to leave you with one last thing. So, you guys who came in late did not get to see the opening piece. And you didn't get to hear my introduction. I've been a performing magician and singer, dancer, comedian for well over 30 years now. And I've traveled the world. I've headlined Las Vegas, had my own off-Broadway show, and all along, I've upheld the Dieselpunk aesthetic, and doing this character, Big Daddy Cool, all around the country, all around the world. It's taken me everywhere, and so it's really, when we talk about Dieselpunk, we talk about the fusion of the aesthetics and the style of the era, mashed up with contemporary technology and whatnot. And from my character's perspective, I love the 30s and 40s gangster style, the swing era style, but I wear contemporary jewelry that would not have been worn historically by a character of my type. And we talk about Dieselpunk being a mashup genre. And so my stage act has been a mashup genre. And I'm going to do a piece for you right now as a demonstration of that. This is actually part of the show tonight. So you guys get a little bit sneak peek, but we'd love to see you back here at 9 because we'll have the Bombshell Kittens with me, which is awesome. Yeah. All right, here we go. So, in Chicago, where I'm from, a few years ago, there was a series of murders. I know, nice chipper topic for a Saturday morning. And the newspaper called them the work of a serial killer. Now, me being in the business that I'm in and knowing some of the cats and kittens what was getting whacked, I knew it wasn't a serial killer, it was a hitman. And the newspaper would publish stories. And I would cut them out, tear them out, keep them, and hang on to them. And they went on for weeks. So, example, some showgirls went missing. Suki Tawdry, Jenny Diver. Band leader Louis Miller disappeared after he took all of his money out of the bank. Some more showgirls, Lolly Linya, Lucy Brown. And the stories went on and on for months, even years. Well, me being a fine, upstanding citizen that I am, when the time was right, I was able to give the cops the last piece of information to put all the pieces together. Thank you. Mac the Knife had struck again. They even wrote a song about it, and it goes a little something like this. How about that band? Well, the shark thing has such teeth, dear, and it shows those pearly lights. Just a jackknife has all that he's here, and he keeps it out of sight. When that shark bites with its teeth, scarlet billows start to spread. The fancy white gloves wears all that he's so there's never a trace of red. You know what? This paddling, singing, and magic is making me a little bit tired. I think I'm going to take a smoke break. Anybody got a lighter? No? Maybe I got one. Here we go. A good Cuban to make you feel proud to be an American. Can you dig that? Except maybe two of them. Smoking, baby! I think I'm about ready to start singing now. He disappeared, yeah, right after he withdrew all of his hard-earned cash. Now old man Keith spends just like a sailor. Could it be our boy's done something rash? I said, Kenny Diver, Suzuki Todd, look out for this sliding yacht, and oh, Lucy Brown. Well, that line forms, it forms on the right, babe. Now they're Maggie. I'm back in town. Look out, old Mackie. He's back. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. I am John Pyka, the artist, also known as Big Daddy Cool. This has been What is Dieselpunk? Dieselpunk 101. Hope you guys have enjoyed your time with me this morning. I'll be doing Unleash Your Superpowers this afternoon at 1 right here in this room, teaching simple to learn magic that looks like superhuman powers. And then tonight on the stage at 9, the Magic Cabaret with Big Daddy Cool and the Bombshell Kittens. It's music, magic, and audience participation. So it's going to be awesome. Thanks for coming. Have a great day at Anachrocon.